In the wake of the great geographical discoveries of the 16th century, the first transoceanic routes reached territories that were previously unknown to Europeans. During this period, Francis Xavier, born to a noble family in the Kingdom of Navarre and a student at Paris University, embarked on an 11-year journey that would lead him to the coasts, towns and villages of Africa, India, Ceylon, Malacca, Singapore and the Moluccas, Japan and the borders of China. Spreading the Christian faith as he went along and offering help to the sick and needy, he showed people what he had learnt from European civilization. But his letters also speak of the beliefs and customs he observed in the previously unheard of countries and places he visited. To this day, 5 centuries later, his influence remains strong everywhere he went, and his itineraries make up a cultural route that combines the values of the West and the Orient, a trail that makes up the universal mark of Francis Xavier. Francis was the youngest of 5 children in a family formed by Juan de Jasso, a doctor of law from Bologna University, and the noble Maria de Azpilcueta. He was born and brought up in the castle of Xavier, a defensive bastion of the Kingdom of Navarre against Aragon. It was a place that provided the foundation for his energetic and determined personality, and where his generous nature and spirit was to develop, characteristics that would stay with him throughout his life. At the age of 19, Francis left for Paris to study philosophy at the Sorbonne. Here he was to undergo a complete personal transformation through his close friendship with Ignatius of Loyola. This led to a change of direction in his life, and he helped to found the Jesuits, a forward-thinking new order whose aims were spiritual renewal and spreading the Catholic faith worldwide. Francis visited many Italian cities, Venice, Bologna, Vicenza and Rome, and then set off from Portugal for the East Indies as papal representative. He began his 13-month trip from Lisbon in 1541, but suffered various setbacks and misfortunes while sailing around the African continent, although he finally reached India. Dressed in a simple black cotton tunic and ringing a brass bell, he visited hospitals, prisons and leper colonies, preaching the Catholic faith and living according to its teachings. He cared for the seriously ill and in turn gained the affection of both the humble and the powerful. He travelled along the fishing coast to Ceylon and Malipur, where he worshipped at the tomb of St. Thomas the Apostle. He had close contact with the Parvas and the pearl fishermen and learned their language, Tamil. He also maintained dialectic meetings with the Buddhist bonzes. He visited Catholic communities and baptized thousands of new Christians. In 1545, after a hazardous 3,500-kilometre journey through the Moluccas, Amboino, Ternate and Las Islas del Moro, he arrived in Malacca, a strategic point on the Portuguese routes to the east, and he continued his mission there. On a later expedition, Francis reached the Japanese coast, a country unknown to the West only a few years earlier, and only referred to by Marco Polo under the legendary name Cipango. Christopher Columbus had also dreamed of reaching this mythical and unexplored land. Indeed, when he discovered the new continent, America, he initially believed himself to be near Japan. Francis Xavier was the first Westerner to have inside knowledge of Japan. He visited its cities, mixed with the people, wore their clothes, ate their food, and discovered and admired their customs. Through his letters, the West received the first true proof of the existence of that new world. His journey led him through Kagoshima, Hirado, Kyoto, Bungo, and Yamaguchi, where he presented himself before the powerful daimyo, Uchi Yoshitaka. offering valuable gifts such as a clavichord, a harquebus, a watch with a music box, and some spectacles, all of which were unknown to Japanese culture. The daimyo was both surprised and grateful, and allowed Francis to set up in an old monastery and preach the Catholic faith in his city streets. Francis became very popular amongst the people of Yamaguchi and acted as the prototype for Western civilization, until then ignored in Japan. From Japan, Francis returned to India and began a new expedition aimed at penetrating the great Chinese Empire, the most powerful and highly populated part of the East. Any foreigner that dared to enter faced the death sentence. He tried on repeated occasions, but finally died across the water from mainland China on Sanchuan Island near Canton. His body was taken to Malacca and then on to Goa, amidst scenes of fervour and adoration amongst his followers. Since then, he has been permanently venerated in Goa, being declared a saint by the Catholic Church and named patron of missions and young people. His native Navarre declared him patron saint of the kingdom. The memory of Francis Xavier and respect for him spread across all the continents. The itinerary followed by Francis Xavier in the 16th century was, in general terms, the route followed by thousands of Europeans and Asians over 400 years, until the Suez Canal was opened and commercial aviation established, as the preferred route for trade and strengthening of cultural exchanges. Nowadays, at the beginning of the third millennium, the route continues to be an attractive and significant link between countries, people, civilizations and religions, traditions, customs and philosophies. Seen as a whole, it explains the cultural history of the world. This route starts in Europe, the continent that today concentrates its efforts as a political union on creating links with countries all over the world through dialogue and cultural exchange. In this respect, Francis Xavier was a man ahead of his time, intent upon bringing cultures closer, opening the doors for mutual understanding between East and West. Francis Xavier is a name that is recognized and admired all over Europe, not only in the countries that he visited, as a living example of someone who dedicated his life to caring for the most needy, but both in Europe and the poorest countries of the world. In Africa, Francis spent time in Mozambique and Malindi, Kenya, where he stopped off on his long journey to India. References to his name can still be found there, and the special spirit of dedication and solidarity pioneered by Francis can be clearly seen. This is strengthened by Navarre's support for various cooperation projects in the areas of health, education and personal development. Francis Xavier's body rests in the Basilica de Bom Jesus in Goa, India, which is visited by men and women of all religions and races as a centre of worship. The fishermen of the Indian Ocean pay tribute to him each year, carrying their nets to his tomb as a sign of gratitude for his constant protection. In many parts of India, the flame of help and solidarity lit by Francis Xavier still burns today through schools, hospitals and assistance centres that bear his name, or that are administrated by Jesuits and other people who continue the work he started. In the Indonesian archipelago of the Moluccas, religious communities maintain the memory of Francis Xavier's hazardous journey to their lands, his miracles, and the help he gave to the most needy. In Japan, people are familiar with the figure of Francis Xavier. School books highlight his name as the person who introduced Christianity into the country and pioneered relations with the West. In Tokyo, the prestigious Sophia University considers itself the inheritor of the presence of Francis, while in Kagoshima, Oita, Kyoto or Nagasaki, monuments and temples keep the name of Francis Xavier alive. In Yamaguchi, the influence of Francis is particularly marked, with plaques and monuments in the places he frequented, and a commemorative modern church that is an important symbol in the city and an indication of the strong relationship between Yamaguchi and Pamplona and their regions. On San Juan Island, in the territory of the People's Republic of China, a church recently reconstructed with the help from Navarre marks the site of Francis's death and houses his first tomb. In nearby Macau and Canton, his testimony is also preserved. Thirteen different countries from 3 different continents make up the route followed by Francis Xavier in caravels and reed boats, overcoming storms and epidemics, taking the spiritual message of peace and brotherhood to the ends of the earth where it now lives on. If we wish to find the origin of this remarkable route across the world, we would start at the Castle of Xavier, a medieval fortress located in the region of Navarre, northern Spain. Francis Xavier was born here 500 years ago, and today it is a major religious and cultural attraction. Xavier is visited every year by thousands of pilgrims, students and tourists from all over the world, some of them from the distant lands where the memory and work of Francis Xavier is still alive. The Castle of Xavier is an imposing 11th century military construction built on a rock. Nowadays, and following extensive restoration work, the authentic layout of Francis Xavier's family home until he was 19 years of age can be seen. It is here that his strong and singular personality was formed. Witness to this are the various elements on display to visitors. The font where he was baptized, the smiling crucifix in the castle chapel where Francis Xavier prayed, or the large number of works by artists from different centuries and countries, illustrating the universal nature of Francis Xavier. A short distance from the castle stands the monastery of Leyden, a jewel of Romanesque architecture and the tomb of the first monarchs of the Kingdom of Navarre. And Sangüesa, a town that preserves the artistic splendor of the Middle Ages and the hospitable nature of the pilgrim's way to Compostela, which crosses Navarre through such significant places as Roncesvalles, Pamplona, Puente la Reina, Estella, Los Arcos, or Viana. The dense woods, spectacular mountains, the greenness of the meadows and the tranquility of the flatlands surprise the pilgrims and travellers on the way to Compostela, and also visitors who come to Navarre to learn about Xavier, a major cultural, artistic and spiritual centre with something of interest for everyone. With its beginnings in this striking Navarrese castle, and stretching as far as Japan, India, China and Indonesia, the universal mark of Francis Xavier took the form of a route that combines traditional, artistic, social and spiritual elements. As such, it provides a condensed cultural history of the world. It is an influence that relates and brings different countries, with different languages and different economic and political spheres, closer, united by a desire to advance towards a better world. The highest tower of this castle gives an excellent view of the fields, mountain ranges and the river banks that witnessed the birth of Francis Xavier and watched him grow 500 years ago. Where better than here to appreciate the universal mark left by a man who opened the way for respect and understanding between East and West, a mark that today looks to the future and is spreading throughout the world.